my audience for the paper. And the paper's titled Exploring Family Drawings with Children Elaborating on Their Role, Relationships and Self-Other Constructions. Now, core constructs are formed in relationship with a primary carer or mother, and they develop into patterns of relating behaviours. And research tells us that newborn infants are able to form two-pole judgment scales, constructs which are used to construe objects and events. The carer or mother-infant relationship is one of mutual construing of construction processes. The mother provides frameworks for the infant to learn to construe his or her needs, seek their satisfaction, and thus a framework to construe the relationship between the two of them. Mothers provide meaning to behaviours elicited from the infants and by responding to certain cues and not to others. The child's construing the family construct systems frames the way in which the child thinks, acts and feels towards significant relationships in his or her world. Relationship with others becomes central to the development of the child's personality and core constructs. They are the most central dimensions of a person's identity, and they govern the child's processes of meaning-making and the development of their role relationships. The most enduring constructs applied to the child's world are those formed in the family of origin. The processes of meaning-making and the development of role relationships are affected by attachment insecurity. The child is unable to effectively anticipate the behaviour of others outside the family, and the child is unable to make sense of the demands of change that arise as a result of knowing the other. Insecurely attached children develop a construct system that is less abstract and reflective than securely attached children. The constructions of self-other of insecurely attached children are often irrational, self-critical and self-blaming. The design, the assumptions and the application behind the tool, the Family Portrait Evaluation Tool, were drawn from research in personal construct psychology and from attachment and developmental trauma research. Following readings in neurofeedback, the design for the tool evolved from the research of Sabina Fisher. For Sabina Fisher, the purpose of neurofeedback is the regulation of dysregulated affect. However, Sabina also writes that when it is the mind and identity that need to reorganise in response to central nervous system changes, it is the time for psychotherapy. Now, to support the effectiveness of her clinical work, she published the drawings of a 10-year-old boy completed over a 4-month course of neurofeedback. She describes how his initial two-dimensional representation of his family became drawings of increasing organisation and complexity. By inhibiting the amygdala, thus changing the frequencies in his brain. So the design behind the Family Portrait Evaluation Tool follows Kelly's proposition that all constructs follow a dichotomous form. The relationship between the two poles of the construct is one of contrast. To understand a construct, it is necessary to understand the contrast that is being made by the child. So, drawing on the work of Siegel, 2013, where he outlines how the attachment for the child is all about security at home and security in the world. And it is also about carers or mothers supplying the basic essence of attachment, and this is what he identifies as the basic essence. First one is letting the child be seen, the second one is be safe, third one be soothed, and the fourth one is to feel secure. So bearing those concepts in mind, or processes, I then designed this evaluation tool. So after I've asked the child to draw their family or their family portrait, I'll then ask these questions. And the first one is, who do you feel safe with? And the contrast is, who do you not feel safe with? The second one is, who do you want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? And the contrast is, who do you not want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? The third one, who helps you feel better when you are upset? And the contrast is, who doesn't help you feel better when you are upset? The next one, who is always there when you need them? And the contrast, who isn't always there when you need them? And the final one, who understands you, who doesn't understand you? So that was the evaluation tool. Now, the assumptions behind the family portrait evaluation tool. As children begin to master language, various core constructs can continue to remain non-verbal, and that figure symbolism can be used to represent personal constructs formed in childhood. We know that the right hemisphere is dominant for the first 3 years of life in processing visual, emotional information, and then continues to play a significant role in childhood, in which the latter maturing left hemisphere is still developing, only to fully mature in late adolescence and sometimes early adulthood.
So to quote Deborah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. S-C-H.
From Siegel.
S-C-H-O-R-E. I've got a list of references if you want to have it. Another assumption is based on Kelly's fundamental postulate. A child's processes are psychologically channelized by the stories that they live and the stories that they tell. Research on attachment has found that children's stories reflect both the content of their attachment style and the ways in which they construct and communicate effective themes. Now, the application of the Family Portrait Evaluation Tool. The Family Portrait Evaluation Tool is administered at the beginning of therapy for children who have experienced complex trauma. The tool is later applied either at the end of therapy or before extended breaks in therapy. Some hypotheses behind the use of the tool. As personal construct psychotherapy becomes a therapy of perpetual change, the child's construing of family relationships will vary in their permeability, ability to take in new ideas, looseness, shifting meanings, and complexity, a variety of perspectives contained within the family system. As the child increasingly organises and articulates her non-verbal constructions, her feeling states, the child is able to make meaning of herself and of herself in relationship to others by experiencing more alternatives to action. Psychotherapy becomes a relationship between validation and invalidation and between comfortable and distressing emotions. Another hypothesis behind the use of the tool. It was hypothesized that changes will occur in the family drawings as the child construes and later reconstrues role relationships in the present, keeping what works for them and giving up what does not work for them. It was also hypothesized that children's responses to the questions will reflect both the sense they make of their attachment relationships and the ways in which they construe and communicate effective themes. And we understand from research that infants form new complex bipolar constructs that become superordinate bipolar constructs of family relationships, family core constructs. So now I'll introduce you two examples of some of the family portraits that I've gathered through my clients. And the first one is Tegan, and this is the first family portrait she did, so this is at the beginning of the therapy. Tegan is 8 years old. She's in out-of-home care, which means that she's been removed from her mother. She had a long history right from birth of domestic violence, and in the last year or so she had a history of physical violence perpetuated by her mother onto her. She's now living with her younger brother's grandmother, and so there's Tegan, her younger brother, the grandmother, and the grandmother's sister, who's quite a bit younger, and she calls her auntie. So they live together. So when I first started working with Tegan, this was her drawing, and then I asked her the questions. Who do you feel safe with? And she said Nan, and the contrast was Mum. Who do you want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? She said Nan, again the contrast was Mum. Who helps you feel better when you're upset? She said Nan, the contrast was Mum. Who is always there when you need them? She said Nan, the contrast was Mum. And who understands you? Again she said Nan, and the contrast was Mum. Now this is Tegan's second drawing, and this is 6 months later, and again I asked her the questions. Who do you feel safe with? And she says Nan and Auntie, and the contrast is Mum. Who do you want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? She said Nan, and the contrast was Mum. Who helps you feel better when you're upset? She said Auntie, and the contrast is Mum. Who's always there when you need them? She said Auntie and Nan, and the contrast is Mum. And who understands you? She said Auntie and Nan, and the contrast is Mum.
Dilation.
Yes. Yes, bit of dispersion of dependencies too. And the next one by Tegan, and this is 4 months later. I hope you can see it. She wanted to do it in pencil, so. And again, I asked her the questions. Who do you feel safe with? And she said Nan and Auntie, and contrast with Mum. Who do you want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? She said teachers, Nan and Auntie, and the contrast with Mum. Who helps you feel better when you're upset? She said Nan, Auntie and teachers, and the contrast is Mum. Who's always there when you need them? She said Nan and Auntie, and the contrast is Mum. And who understands you? She said Nan and Auntie, and the contrast Mum. Now while she was drawing it, this was her narration, so I'll read it to you, it's interesting. This is how I remember how to draw a house, she says. Eyes, hair, she's pointing to the roof as the hair. Mouth, tongue and nose, and that, and what that is it's the chimney, is like a stylish part of hair, she says. Can I draw them as a square? I'm all into Minecraft, she says. A little odd, that's how I do it, and my cousins, because we don't know how to draw circles. I'm drawing a Cleopatra for my auntie. She loves Cleopatra. She doesn't like to wear dresses. That's how I draw my brother, and he's on the far right. That's how I draw my mum, she's on the near left. And now my Nan, she's on the far left. I'm in the house looking out the window. That's what I pretty much do. Look out the window, play my iPad and go to sleep. So that's Tegan. Now I'll introduce you to Julie. She's 9 years old. Julie again is out of home care. She's been removed from her parents, and she was only recently removed from her parents because they had violated a number of parole conditions, and they were both on drug charges for consumption and for dealing. So Julie has a younger brother who's about a year younger, and so Julie and the younger brother were removed and placed with grandparents. Their maternal grandparents, although the paternal grandparents lived nearby, so they had access to both grandparents. So this was the first picture that Julie did when we started working together. And again, I asked her the same questions. Who do you feel safe with? She said grandma, maternal, and the contrast was no one. Who do you want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? She said mum, and the contrast was her brother, the first brother. Now she had the little one, the little brother. He's a toddler, and he's remained for, I don't know the reason, remained in the care of the mother. Who helps you feel better when you're upset? She said mummy's friend, and the contrast is my brother, first brother. Who's always there when you need them? Grandma, paternal, but she didn't draw the paternal grandmother. And the contrast was dad. Who understands you? She said mummy's friend and mummy, and the contrast was uncle and maternal uncle, and again she didn't draw the maternal uncle. And the next one. Now this one was done only 2 months later, and 2 months later because they moved. So I lost contact with Julie, and it had something to do with the care arrangements with the grandparents. But I asked her again the same questions. Who do you feel safe with? And she said mummy and grandparents, and the contrast was the first brother and daddy at the moment, she said. Who do you want to help you when you feel worried or stressed? She said mummy, and the contrast was brother, the first brother. He makes it worse, she added. Who helps you feel better when you're upset? She said grandmothers and mummy, and the contrast is the brother, the first brother. Who was always there when you need them? She said mummy and the grandmas, and the contrast is dad. And who understands you? She said mum and grandma, and that's a maternal grandma, and the contrast is the uncle, maternal uncle, but she didn't draw him. So now we get to the big question. How useful is this tool as a measure of psychotherapeutic outcome in child psychotherapy? Well, at this time, the tool is unable to do this. However, I think it's contributing, and I'm very pleased with the way it's contributing to the therapeutic process in the following ways. The picture drawing provides a spontaneous and immediate access to pre-verbal constructs. The tool provides a means to contain confusing experiences of family life and for the child and therapist to view these relationships. And the tool allows for the validation of constructs, including core constructs of self, constructs which are often submerged for fear of invalidation. And finally, can the tool reflect reconstruing by the child as they reconnect with their family and themselves? The ability of the tool to reflect the reconstruing of the child will always be constrained, as the understanding must be of the child's understanding, not of the child. And finally, and while people are usually ashamed of seeing what they are not supposed to see, the tool encourages the child to reflect on those stories that are never told. So thank you very much for